a page to record debtors and a page to record creditors. In the previous lesson, we saw that an IOU which arrives in the firm as a payment cannot be recorded in the tally of cash, yet it is value which comes into the assets of the firm, and later it will become cash. So instead of covering the page recording cash with plenty of margin notes when we receive IOUs, we record them on another page called debtors. What does this page look like? Well, it is very simple. We list the clients and their IOUs and put the amount of each IOU in one column called, naturally enough, debit. The layout of this page, in its first version, that's not its final form, is this. There is a title, debtors, a list of clients that paid with IOUs and became therefore debtors, and one column that, naturally enough, is called debit. Steve wrote to us an IOU for 100, Marcel for 70, Jennifer for 120, etc., etc., etc. Similarly, when we pay a supplier with an IOU to be transformed later into cash, we record it in our accounting system on a page called creditors. And there will be a column of credits that somehow we obtained from these suppliers. Augusto, we owe Augusto 50, and we wrote an IOU to Augusto for that. We owe Deirdre 85. Next question, of course. What do we do when Steve pays? We could, of course, cancel the 100 and enter 100 into the cash tally. That is, we would cross off Steve here, and that would leave somehow the page debtors. And of course, since Steve now pays us with cash, we would enter 100 into the cash account. But that's not the way we do. We make another entry in the debtors page in another column. So we write Steve, and here we write 100. And these two 100s, they cancel each other. So question, why not write minus 100 in the debit column? That is just here. We could write minus 100 here, after all, it would be the same. Well, the reason is essentially historic. The Arabic numbers and calculations with them were just being introduced in Western Europe between the year 1000 and the year roughly 1200. Around the year 1000, the Pope, Sylvester II, who was also a mathematician, introduced in Western Europe Arabic numbers, but they took a long time to be accepted. Even in 1202, Fibonacci, Leonardo de Pisa, wrote a famous book called Liber Abaci that explained also the use of Arabic numbers as something very new. And this was precisely the time, these were the times of the invention of double entry accounting. On top of that, the sign that we are very familiar with, plus and minus, they were invented only in the late 15th century. So at the time of invention of double entry accounting, they just did not exist. And anyway, the columns debit and the other one are very convenient to mean pluses and minuses. And so now similarly, when we pay, say Deirdre, we pay Deirdre 85 that we owe her. Well, same thing. We make another entry into another column. So we separate two columns. And here we write Deirdre again. $85. And these two 85s cancel each other. And of course, since now we pay Deirdre, in the cash tally, that I will call eventually, of course, the cash account, well, there is 85 that leave the account. Well, so let's see the movements of value that we have been recording. When receiving an ROU is value coming in the firm. Having an ROU paid is value leaving the debtors page, and cash entering the cash page. Paying with an ROU is value leaving our firm via the creditors page, and cancelling an ROU that we owe to somebody else and paying cash is value somehow entering the creditors page to cancel the ROU and leaving the cash page. So Italian merchants, they observed that the column next to debit on the debtors page worked exactly like the column credit in the creditors page, so they called it credit. And similarly, in the creditors page, the column that was here, they called debit. Of course, we could call the debit column plus and the credit column minus. But I repeat once again, when double entry accounting was invented, algebra was quite new in Europe, and these signs, plus and minus, were not yet invented. This procedure of recording in a debit column value coming in and in a credit column value leaving can perfectly be used for the cash tally as well. And it will be called, of course, the cash account. Accounts are pages on which we record value of the same sort, nature. And let's take a peep at the very first mechanism of double entry accounting. Finally, this procedure will be used for all sorts of pages, which will be called accounts. For instance, when we buy a van and we pay the van cash, the firm receives the van from the rest of the world, and 4,000 euros leave the firm to the supplier who belongs to the rest of the world. There is a page in our accounting systems that records value of the van nature, transportation equipment nature, and it is debited 4,000 euros. And there is the cash account, the cash page that we are familiar with, that is credited 4,000, because here 4,000 euros in value in the form of a van enter the firm, and here 4,000 euros in the form of cash leave the firm, and therefore is recorded in the cash account.